Welcome to the Gamification Quest podcast series, where we showcase the voices behind our new collection on gamification and game-based learning, the Sententia Anthology. I'm your host, Monica Cornetti, and in each episode, I sit down with one of our authors to explore the ideas and stories they've brought to life in their chapter. Together, these conversations reveal how creative, passionate professionals are transforming the way adults learn. Let's dive in. Hello, my name is Monica Cornetti, and welcome to this special edition of the Gamification Quest podcast. Today, I have a special guest, one of our anthology writers. His name is Javier Velasquez. And his chapter, I want to make sure I get this right, is Fail Smart, Lose to Learn the Gamified Way. So Javier is known internationally for being a game and a gamification designer. He's designed over 100 projects. He's won numerous international awards for his designs. And as the founder of the BEM framework, he has been invited to lead master's level courses and all kinds of different instruction on the correct way to use what is fun in games and move that over to a non-game context in gamification. Javier has been involved with our Gamicons since the very beginning. He started winning awards, he served as a judge, he's been a speaker, and we just count him as our friend and our colleague, and we're always so excited to learn from him. So Javier, thank you so much for being with us today. I am just delighted to be interviewing you about your chapter. I loved it. As I was reading it, I kept highlighting and underlining because I got a printout version of it, and it's so very good. So thank you for being here.
I'm so excited to be here, Monica. I have always felt like part of the Sententia family. I was so glad that you invited me to be part of this anthology, and I did my best. I was actually really motivated to write this long essay, but it's a topic that I feel it's really close to my heart. So I'm really excited to see it coming through, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
It is so good, and I was not that I was caught off guard. That's not the right word, but when I saw the focus of your chapter, that's where I want to start. That's where I want to start. So what motivated you to start to have this as your topic of Fail Smart? What was the motivation behind that?
Sure thing. So one of the main things that happens with learning through failure is that it's nothing new. So people have been talking about learning through failure for a long time. But I think it has become a catchphrase. Like, for example, if you think on the agile world, they talk about fail fast, right? So there's a lot of things around failure that promotes learning and people know about it. But actually, you don't see a lot of stuff around how people learn through failure and how failure should be designed. So I was thinking there are a lot of people that fail fast and then abandon the tasks they're trying to do, because failing fast doesn't mean motivating people. It's not. Failure doesn't equate to learning every time, or doesn't equate to the right type of learning every time. So thinking about this, I started looking at the games I played with this lens of how they're managing to create interesting failure, that I won't abandon the game, but it keeps me engaged, and it actually keeps me learning. And I started finding that there were a lot of patterns of design that were really interesting, and people don't talk about them. They just say, okay, you should fail and learn from failure, but you cannot learn from failure every time. Failure requires some aspects, some interesting conditions to actually be actionable. So that's what drove me to write this chapter. I think we needed to talk about not just about learning through failure, but creating the appropriate context so failure can actually teach you. So I thought it was a really interesting thing. And I think it's those bits of gamification that are not about the rewards or the badges or these superficial things, but the core concepts of what's behind game design that can be applied into the real world in L&D and in the context of a university class, for example, that I felt it was really interesting to work around that and put my head into it.
It's really good, because as you think about that, all failure is not an opportunity to learn. It's how we frame that. So a lot of times what I've seen happen with failure is that people just like implode. they don't learn, they don't grow. It's just like, oh, I'm a failure. Why did I think and so there is no learning that or growth that happens from that. And then on the other side of that, you have people who are so afraid of failure that they won't try anything for fear of looking foolish in front of somebody, or like they should know this already. They don't want to let anybody know that they don't know how to do it. So, but I think that starts, and you mentioned this in your book, and you called it a design for success bias, that this gets ingrained in us in our education system. And again, just naivety, self-centeredness. I kind of thought that was just US based education. But after reading your chapter, I realized, no, it's probably more universal than not. So talk with me about what does that mean and why does it matter that success bias is there?
Sure. So it's really interesting that when you think about, if you're trying to make something exciting, right? Like interesting, I want to make something interesting, and you're thinking about gamification, for example, not traditional learning. Let's just go with gamification to make it a little bit even better, right? But when you start working with that, if you're thinking, I want to make this exciting, what your brain does is tell you, I need to create systems that will reward my users when they are successful. That's the main thing that your brain will do. It's, okay, I want to give them points, I want to give them badges, I want to create all these scenarios or all these things that will keep you excited because you're doing well. So that's kind of what the design for bias is about understanding that we always start looking like that because we think that that will reinforce behavior, that we have all these operant conditioning, classic conditioning ideas that we need to reinforce good behaviors because that creates positive learning, right? So you start by doing that. You start by doing, okay, what happens if you pass the test, if you pass the trivia, if you pass the game, anything, you want to make it exciting, right? But the thing is that most of the time, and this is universal, most of the time we are, as a countermeasure, punishing failure. And what we're doing is training people to avoid failure, to have this kind of fear, innate fear around failure, that you can see it in a classroom everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world, we use the same standardized testings and the same grading systems with a little bit of divergence here and there, but it's almost the same all around the world. It's about, if you fail, you will be punished. If you succeed, you will be rewarded. And by doing this, you tend to either ignore failure states when people will fail, or actively punish those failure states. So if you don't do well enough, you will get a bad consequence. And when you do this, it's a bias. You don't do it consciously. I think most people just think it's the way to go. And when you try to see how games work, they don't work the same way. That's the interesting part. Game designers, by failing and iterating, have learned that they have to understand failure in a different way, that failure shouldn't be about punishing, and I shouldn't just think about successful states, because success states will thrive within the system, but most of your players will lose. And when you know that your players will lose, if you don't think about the conditions that you will create around those losing conditions, when you lose is when you freeze, or when you fly, when you abandon the system. So this is the most important part. If you think abandonment is a problem in your course, it's probably because players are not failing well. It's because you're creating fear around failure, and you're just focusing on what happens when they succeed and not the other way around. So that's the idea behind this design for success bias.
It's really interesting because I know that, well, I listen to 15-minute book summaries every morning, and I don't know what book I read it in, but it was so interesting to me because the author was talking about that we've totally messed up testing, that testing, the purpose of testing was to show us what we don't know. And that's the value in testing, is not that, well, now you get a bad grade because you don't know this. It was to show you this is what you know and this is what you don't know. So go back and learn again. But we messed that all up. And when I think about playing games, I mean, there are times when I play that I get so frustrated. Like if I'm playing a game, I mean, I'll just throw my phone across the couch and say, I'm done. But then I go back because I'm thinking, well, maybe, what if I tried this way? Right? Because I could try a different way and maybe I can get past it this time. And our education system doesn't have that. It's like I remember when I was working on my master's in the math class in particular, it was really hard. And it was a gamble. So you took a quiz, you got a score. Then you could
Yeah,
gamble and take it again, but you're automatically going to lose a certain amount of percentage points and have to accept that grade. So it was always this, rather than identifying what I didn't know and go back and learn it, it was, okay, now we're going to gamble with your grade and you have
sure,
to decide how risk averse you are. And
sure.
so, yeah. So when you think about game design, they've got it built in for us to fail. I think it's so interesting that know that the majority of your players are going to fail.
Yeah.
Imagine if our teachers, well, they wouldn't be able to hold their job. They'd be let go if they said, well, most of my students are going to fail. They'd be like, well, you're out of here.
Out
That,
of here.
yeah.
Yeah, and as a game
So,
designer, you design for that, right? You
yeah.
design
So
to create failure.
education gets it wrong. Game design gets it right. And is it because, why do you think that is? Help me understand that.
So I think education, in the context of what you have just said, what happens is they try to make this kind of simulation as if you were already a professional that shouldn't miss, and forget that you are in a learning process where that's the place where you should miss, where you should have failure, right? So they treat you as, okay, if you're, I don't know, an engineer, you shouldn't mess any of the equations because that's bad, right? But you're not a professional right now. You're in the process of becoming that, and the learning loop requires you to fail. So games have another approach. In games are learning systems by themselves. They don't they are not designed for the expert player at the first glance. You become an expert player as you play, but you're not designing for the expert player. You're not designing for the professional, even the professional gamer. They have to go through all the iterations and all the learning process. So because games are these weird learning systems, game designers understand that if I need to teach, I'm going to talk about video games, but this can be applied in different ways to different kinds of games, right?
Right.
But if I think about video games where I don't have a teacher or a more knowledgeable other besides me telling me what I'm doing wrong, I need to make sure that players can understand what they're doing right or wrong just from the feedback they get. And the place where they will get it the most is the moment when they are failing, not the moment when they're succeeding. When they're just succeeding, they cannot do the metacognition to understand what they're doing right. But in the moment you fail, the game designer knows that that's the moment when the players will try to create new strategies, will create new hypotheses, will try to create new ways of figuring out the problem. So the designer always is trying to make you fail as a concept. It's really interesting. As a teacher, and what I do in my gamified classes is always thinking how I'm going to make my students fail. But it's not about grading them over that failure, because then I'm becoming this bad teacher that's just punishing.
Yeah. Punisher. You're a
Yeah,
punisher.
I'm
Yeah.
becoming a punisher. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I understand that I want them to fail on a safe environment where the reward is that they will get a feedback to try again and do it again. And that's the way game designers do it by tradition, by just the way we understand how to create exciting systems. So in education, we have this tendency to think, okay, this is for the pro. They can't miss it. We're evaluating, and we have these leaderboards that are really insidious in a way, where we want to know who are the best players and who are the best students. And it's really a really weird competitive system where it's not about the learner per se, but around this idea of filtering the best of the best, right? So it becomes a complex system where you have to get it right the first time, and that's better in the classical educational system.
Right. You mentioned in your book, in your chapter, you mentioned 5 pillars that game designers have for planning to design for failure. And I forget what you called them exactly. Like, I guess they were like smart failure
Yeah.
pillars, something like that. But L&D, like you just said, when you're teaching your classes, you're designing, thinking about how can I get my learners to fail, not to grade them, but to learn. But in L&D, we're not doing that. We're like spoon feeding you. Look, here's the right answer. Here's the right answer. Look over here. So what are some of those pillars, or at least one, do you think that L&D is totally missing out on?
Yeah. So L&D has another problem. It's not the grading part, because you're not grading, or almost never grading,
Yeah.
right? But the thing with the L&D is that L&D professionals are mostly rated by people completing the courses. And this creates a weird incentive where L&D professionals try to make the courses as easy as possible and as short as possible to increase that indicator, right? So the kind of courses you create are not the best for creating a good environment for learning. It's just the incentives that are that are out there, right?
Done. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we need to check,
Yeah.
right? So managing failure in this kind of context is also a problem in itself. Maybe I'm not grading, but I'm still trying to make you lose the less as possible, so you will manage to finish the course. So I will reduce difficulty, for example. And one of the things that in L&D, I think you miss, these 5 pillars have all sorts of things, like reducing uncertainty, for example, or giving new information with each iteration, which is a lot of work. And again, this creates a lot of design choices, and it creates a cognitive load on the designer part, because there's a lot to figure out to create really good failing systems. But I think one of my I don't know, my favorite pillars to talk about, and the one I left it for last on the article, is the one that's called empowering a loss, or empower your losers. I think it's called the pillar, right? And I like that especially because that's the most counterintuitive one, right? So that's the one that most people will never think about, because it's about understanding that failure should be, in a sense, rewarded. That if you reward failure, people will tend to like to fail more. But that kind of reward is it's not easy to design. It's not easy to grasp this whole idea of rewarding failure. So the main example I gave is, for example, Mario Kart, like this rubber band effect, where if you're behind the line, you will get better power-ups. Like you have more, for example, in a classroom, if you're behind the class, you should have more time with the teacher to actually get more information to improve. And teachers usually are biased to give more time to the best students, because those are the students that reward you as a teacher, right? So the thing in terms of L&D is, if we want to create this empowerment by loss, you need to first create these moments of failure. Like, again, I need to create a system where people will be able to learn by failing the system, and then when you fail, you get something that can empower you in a way. And I think that's one of the pillars that are most forgotten, because again, you think about punishing, about I need to reward your success and not think about what happens if you fail. And I think if you manage to get that pillar right, and people start losing and being engaged with loss, you can change the way you manage to make people finish their courses, because it's not about doing the course as short as possible. It's maybe I don't have to have many content, as in the classic arcade games. I don't have to have a lot of content, but I can do it hard enough so people will spend some time retrying, trying to figure it out, and enjoying that sense of retrying. It's harder than it seems, because when I have applied in some contexts, people that are really busy, they don't like to have to retry too much the course, and it actually creates tension with the real world. So it's not easy to get right, but it's really interesting to try to get right, because when you manage to do something well there, you can actually see the improvement in learning in your course. So I think that's the pillar that I'm most interested about.
It is true, because there was a term, I don't know that we're still using it as much in 26 as we've used it 24, 20, but I heard over the term snackable learning. We want snackable learning, which meant we just want 3 to 5 minutes, quick hit, assume they'll learn it, keep going. And I think, well, I'll learn it for now, but if I tried to tell you about it tomorrow, I'd have to be digging back through, which is what happens with my 15-minute book summaries, is that I learned something really interesting, and then I have to go back. You can both listen and read, and I find what's written. And like I was doing that about Gen Zs last night, that this whole book on failure was they don't like to get driver's license and ask people out on dates because they're afraid of failing. And I was like, I know these people. I know some of those people. They're in my extended family, right? But I had to look back because I couldn't remember exactly, because it was a snackable lesson. And our desire to check boxes, to say it's done, to say we provided the training, there's no reason you're not making sales. you're not making sales because you're not trying hard enough. And if you just tried harder, I gave you the training. It's not the lack of training, it's a lack of you having the tenacity to go after it, which is all backwards. You said something in the book, in your chapter, that failure is a design problem. What is that? Failure is a design problem, like not the problem of the learner. It's
Yeah.
help me understand that.
So when I was a teacher in high school, I have been a teacher in a high school environment, in university, in college, in corporate environments. I have teaching a lot of places. This is something that I remember most of in my high school teacher days, but I think it happens all the time. And it's that usually teachers tend to place the blame of the learning responsibility on the students. Like if they're not learning, it's their fault. They're not placing the effort. It's because they're not studying. They're not doing the homework I'm telling them to do. It's their fault. It's the learner's fault, right? So if they fail, I can push the blame. And if I push the blame, what happens in high school or in university is that you have like these captive audiences that they have to assist. They have to pass. They're paying to be there and they have to pass, or the punishment is high. So this creates an incentive for the teacher to, okay, I create a standardized classroom, and if you fail, it's because you didn't place the effort, right? So when I say that failure is the problem of the designer or the design, the designer as an extension,
Right.
not a problem on the learner. Again, I'm talking through the lens of the game designer, because the game designer doesn't have a captive audience. So if you fail and you abandon the game, it's not your fault. It's my fault. It's my responsibility to keep you engaged in the moments where you're feeling more pressured, when you're feeling more frustrated, when you're feeling that you're not doing well enough, when you feel like you're down, because failure has that problem. Failure can give you the blues, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
sure. So if you're feeling bad because you failed, and I'm pressing upon that feeling, that emotional state, and trying to push you even lower, then it is my responsibility, and it's the designer's responsibility and the design responsibility of managing to create better failure states. The game designer understands, if I create better failure systems where you can fail safely, don't be as punished, and actually use all these pillars of reducing uncertainty, giving new information, all these elements that help you create better failing environments, then you are helping your learner to manage failure and above and rise on the occasion, right? So again, it's because the design is pushing you to get better through failure. And that means, as a designer, you have a responsibility, and it's not the blame of the learner. And when you shift it like that, you become more aware of your own your own design biases. For example, okay, where am I pushing my players down, where I'm making them want to abandon, where I am the responsible because maybe I'm placing a challenge that's too high, the stakes are too high. There are things that I can do to make it worse for the learner, and inversely, there are things that I can do to make it better for the learner. So if I make it the designer responsibility to understand failure, then you have to think about your failure states when you're designing. You cannot ignore them. You need to think, okay, what will happen if I play this challenge? And I know that 60% of my students won't be able to tackle that challenge. What should I do when I know they won't be able to do it? Will I just grade them and say, oh, sorry, you didn't do it? Or should I create iterations and a process of learning where they will be able to get better over time? Again, it's my responsibility. It's the responsibility of the design, not the responsibility of the learner. Of course, there is a core responsibility. If the learner doesn't want to do, of course, there's part of the blame, but I cannot just push all the blame to my learner. That's the important part.
That's very good. I know that in our planning for our Gamechon, like we have a live one coming up in October, and even in planning for that, and we do what we call agility drills every event team meeting. Like, this is a situation that happened. Our first tendency, I don't know if it's just innate, but it's your problem, not mine, right? Like, well, it's your fault because I don't see anyone else having that same problem here. It must be something with you. But we're working on shifting that mindset, that our first response is more automatic of, well, what can we do to make this better? How can we adjust something? Because it's not you as an individual. It's not your fault. There's something that's not working for you here. Now, again, I'm not saying that we're going back to spoon feeding, because I'm not, but we also have that responsibility. If there is failure, it's not their fault. It's something that we've done that we weren't like learner specific. I wasn't really trying to see what exactly is it that Javier needs in this session to make sure that he can take this learning and then do something with it. Because the whole reason for any kind of corporate training is that you can do something with it, not that you can pass a test. A test is, I, I don't care. I don't, it doesn't, can you save a life? Can you reduce time to get a product to market? Can you increase your sale, right? So what can you do with it? And if I just assume, well, he doesn't get it, there's something wrong with him, then I'm removing myself from that equation, which is not, yeah, that's really good. Really, really good. When you think about L&D though, in general, this is so contrary to what L&D professionals are taught how to design programs. They're taught in school, they're taught by their training managers, they're taught by their SMEs, their subject matter experts. They've got 2 days at most to create a program that they're going to roll out to 12,000 people, and all 12,000 people are going to be motivated. It's just so contrary to how L&D works in the real world. So what's your average L&D person supposed to do with this information? Like, how can they, I know they can't take it maybe for every course, but what can they take from it? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Sure thing. And it happens, for example, one of the things that I do, I usually, I'm working more with teachers in high schools and university levels than with the L&D professionals, but I think it's relatable. The problem is relatable because one of the things that happened with the teachers I teach is that they are always a little bit anxious about the amount of work they have to do to incorporate a gamified setting on a classroom, for example. And I tell them, of course, a game designer, when I'm designing a game, I can take up to 4 months for just one game, for just one subject matter. So if we're going to gamify a whole classroom, how much time will I need to create a perfect game? And that doesn't make sense. So game-based learning and serious gaming is amazing, but we need to leave that for the professionals that are doing those serious games and are trying to replicate them all over. But as a teacher or as an L&D instructor, an instructional designer, it's hard for me to just try to create these complex things. I don't know. I'm thinking about the experiments that Gamechangers does with a lot of budget. Amazing, he can do that. But most of people cannot do that.
I know.
Yeah. We cannot do that. So what I want people to understand is that if you understand the psychology element behind failure, you can do really smart and quick experiments that work around that. For example, I will give you an example. In the classroom that in the class I'm giving right now to a master's degree students in education, I have a WhatsApp group, and within the class, we do all of these heavy duty experiments and these longer learning loops where they can fail, and they fail a lot in class, but I'm there to provide feedback. But it's a longer loop. But I actually have a WhatsApp group where I use the poll system of WhatsApp to every day give them a challenge through WhatsApp. It's something really small. Something that doesn't require any programming skills, any weird skills that you need to just know how to create a poll. But all of those polls, I'm building them through these mechanisms of failure, of learning through failure. So it's about collective failure. So I create a poll, I make them answer the questions, and through those answers, I create different feedback mechanisms to allow them to understand the gaps that they have in their knowledge base. It's just about that. It's only so they know that all the preconceptions they had about what they think was motivating, what was a goal, all the things that they think they know, just by playing these WhatsApp mini games, they start seeing, okay, this is not as easy. I was not understanding this. I need to create some iterations before I start understanding. But it's through failure, and every challenge I create is built around the idea that they will fail it. I designed it for that purpose. And I think about the feedback I will give them to make that failure meaningful for them. And they know they won't be graded for messing that up. They can fail in a safe environment. It's an easy, it doesn't create a lot of progression loss, for example. And it's a simple mechanism that you can apply in your course, right? There are many ways of applying this, but it's understanding that I know they're going to fail. I provide the feedback that's meaningful and emotionally meaningful for them to make them want to keep testing. And we are in the 5th week, and they're always playing my mini game, and they know because I'm telling them all the time, you're going to fail, and they still play it because that has become the challenge, right? And it's something small, really small. You don't have to go with this big budget, serious game things. It's just about changing your framework of thought. Just understanding that the challenge you're giving, don't do it so they will succeed. Don't have the expectation that they will succeed. Have the expectation that they will lose, and you will design what will happen when they actually lose. And that changes everything from small practices to big ones. And it has a lot of power.
I think right there, though, you've just touched on something that is problematic for any type of leader or instructor or manager, and that is people are going to fail, and we're uncomfortable with that. We don't want to give any kind of feedback that's not positive. That's not, this was just amazing. I really liked how you did X. Here's what you might want to consider this next time. But every time I'm in a class with leaders and I'm asking them about their most valuable experiences, they are always about when one of their early managers sat down and had the hard conversation with them about what they needed to do to be better. And that had such a positive impact on them, because like they say, I would not be where I am in my career right now if it wasn't for that individual. Yet I think for the most part, we avoid that. I don't want to have to give that kind of feedback. So designing, knowing they're going to get it wrong, I mean, that puts you at a lot of risk too, Javier. I don't think a lot of people are comfortable there at all.
No. And that's what you need. That's what you need to know how to design for it, right? It's not just making people fail and giving feedback. It's not that. That's not failing smart. That can be failing fast. That can be other kinds of failing. But failing smart is understanding that the kind of feedback that you will give must be attuned emotionally, for example, and cognitively to your players in a way that it's really meaningful for them, so they understand that, okay, loss is creating something valuable for me, right? But for that, you need to create the framework. Again, when a player begins a game, they know they will lose. They know it. They're primed to know that in Mario Kart, the first time you will race, you won't get in the first position. I know that will happen because that's part of the idea of I'm wanting the challenge. So if you tackle your course in this sense, in a way that people feel primed for play and not primed for success in the traditional way, right? It shifts everything, because now the feedback that you give around failure, it's a way of using information to tackle the challenge again. And again, of course, I can, if I punish too much my players, I will lose them. Again, in game design, we have all these problems. It's not like in games people they like to lose. No, it's not like that. People hate to lose. They hate to lose, and they hate to be punished for losing. So it's the techniques that you use to actually manage those failure states, that you use to say, okay, how I'm going to give the feedback. Okay, so 80% of you failed the test, but that was expected because I did it in that way. But again, you will try it again, and I know that you will be 20% better. Let's see if we can do that. It changes everything, because now I'm telling you, I knew that you were going to fail. It's not your fault. It's the system's fault. I can take part of the blame, but I'm not just placing the blame on me. This is part of the process, so you can get better. And if I promise, the promise is not that you will do fine, it's that you will get better. Everything changes. Again, I can lose, but I know with each iteration, and if I feel progress, and if the loops are short enough, so I don't feel like, okay, I have to spend 3 months on this, I don't know, this paper or this thing that they're asking for me in my work environment. I don't know. I have 3 months of writing this, and then they're going to give me a lot of feedback and telling me, okay, this is all wrong. Of course, I will feel punished, right? So shorten the loops. Make your loops a little bit shorter so people can iterate more and can feel the reduction of uncertainty. That's the most important part here, is if you fail, but after failure, your uncertainty is reduced. Now I know a little bit more. Now I can try a little bit better. I don't mind losing, because that's the whole point of losing, is reducing uncertainty, is trial and error, right? And trial again. If it's just trial and error, it's not great. But if it's trial, error, and retry, now we're getting something. If we're just finalizing things, if I'm just telling you failed, game over, let's go back to our homes, then I'm doing it wrong. And that's the main thing around this article, is understanding that there is a way of doing it wrong, and we mostly do it wrong because we don't understand these principles that can help us make this better.
Yeah. What's so interesting about that is, like, every game that we play, we start out that way, right? Like, we start out, let's just do a trial run, right? Like, we're going to turn all our cards over so we can all see them. So, like, we know that we don't understand it. We're going to learn it. We're going to try one, then we're going to play a game, and we're just trying it out. We know we don't have it. But yet when it comes to learning, we're never willing to give ourselves that kind of grace. No. Like, you don't got this, but just try it. See what you do have. See what you do understand. Then we'll try it again. Then we'll try. Yeah. It's really good. Really, really good. All right. I want to ask you one last question. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
In my class, for example, this is a master's degree class, and they have to do this whole project around this semester. And the idea is that they're going to do gamification experiments. But the way I'm going to grade them, because I have to, right? I have to grade them. It will not be around success metrics, like, okay, I want your experiment to be a great gamification project. I'm measuring them around effort and around the learning they get from each loop. So the idea is, the more you risk in your experiment and the more you can say you learn from that experiment, the better it will be for you. It's not about getting it right. It's about learning the most that you can from the experiment. And I'm trying to change the way, the metric, the rubric, from success and performance to understanding, to learning, because that removes a little bit the anxiety of doing it wrong. Okay, if I do it wrong, if I say I learn and I can make the metacognition, then I'm doing it right. So it changes a bit the way they're anxious because they have to do a project, but they're less anxious that it's about getting the experiment right. So you change the framing, and that can create all sorts of new things.
Yeah, that's really good. In our certifications, we encourage that also. It's not about getting it right. It really is that I tried it, and this is what I learned from it. And to do it differently next time, I would try this. And now we do have a rubric, because like let's say, for example, I'm trying to find something here that would be a design. I cleaned everything off, but as far as design, I want you to do the very best that you can with whatever budget and time you have. I want you to make it just as engaging as with the look of it. So we do have like a rubric for that. But if you deploy a project and you find out this just didn't work, and here's why, and this is the feedback that I got, and I'm going to iterate it and do it, I'm thrilled that there was learning that happened from it. Because I mean, one of our sayings is the only way to learn gamification is to do it. And every time we design, there's something that isn't right? Like, we look at it and think, well, of course, why did we do that? And if we don't, oops, there goes my desk. Sorry. Wait. Jonathan will love that. Hold on. I thought it was locked. Okay. If we don't have that learning, then we shouldn't be designing at all, because we've got to be open to pushing ourselves as far as we can, but then realizing, okay, this will work, this won't work, here's why, and really studying it. It's really good. All right, I have one final question.
Sure.
If your learners, okay, excuse me, let me say it again. If the readers of your chapter, if they've read all the chapters in the anthology and they're trying to describe what they've read to somebody, if they were going to remember one thing from your chapter, what would you hope that would be?
I think the chapter has, I think, three main objectives. The first one is to create awareness. If you read the chapter and you feel like you have a new awareness around what failure means and what's your responsibility around failure, I think that's amazing. That's okay. You won 1 star, 1 out of 3, right? So that's great. The
I'm
second,
on the leaderboard. Yay.
yeah, yeah. So that's amazing. If you get that awareness, I'm fine with it. The second one is understanding this notion of failure loops and these pillars. And what I want people to get from that is actually to understand that learning is a process that you acquire through repetition, and failing is part of that repetition process. If you get that and understand how those repetitions are built, how you design those loops, you will get better at designing learning experiences just by understanding the loop, and that there are different kinds of loops and that you can manage failure in different manners. You will be able to understand, okay, I can tackle the problem from a higher level, a higher perspective, right? So that's the second one. But the third one, the main giveaway here, is that you can do it fast, and you can do it. There's a lot of simple techniques that, from understanding the skill sets that you want to teach, the kinds of loops that are better for that one, and trying to experiment and see what happens, and understand that failure is part of the design process as well, and that learning from the design process is interesting as well, that you will be able to tackle your projects with these kind of ideas, and maybe you won't get everything from the article, but you will start getting it from your real life experience by trying to do this, trying to change your perspective from a success biased kind of learning experiment to failure first, understand that failure will be the engine of learning, and how can I apply this idea of failure as the way to create the scaffolding process, all the things that you want to create. So those are the main three ideas. Of course, around all of that, there will be always this big motto: it's failure is the designer's responsibility, not the learners. If you get that in your head, that's amazing, and you don't have to read a chapter for that. But if you read it, I think you will understand better what that means, what that entails, and you will be able to create better experiments in the future around learning and failure. So that's what I want you to take away from this article.
Yeah, really is good. So Javier, thank you so much for sharing your chapter with us, and for everyone who reads the anthology will of course be able to just be able to take that chapter and to be able to use it as they just make, I'm going to say, make learning better, whether that's a teacher of young students or older students, whether it's corporate training, higher ed, whatever that is, even in our relationships, just, as we work to, like, if we're raising children or grandchildren, just to help them to learn that it's okay to try, it's okay to change your mind, it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to ask different questions, right? This is all okay. It's all part of the learning. It's so good. So thank you for doing this interview today. Of course, this is just we're interviewing all of the anthology authors, so be sure and check out the different podcasts with all the authors. The hardback anthology will be available by Gamechangers in New Orleans, so you'll be able to purchase it there. And then also look for pre-sale. We'll have pre-sale out there, and the book will be available for anyone who wants to grab that. I think that you'll enjoy it completely and learn so much, because each perspective brings just a little bit different story to the table about what great gamification design looks like. So Javier, thank you so much. Really appreciate you, appreciate your time, appreciate the effort you put into this chapter. I know it was a lot, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
I loved it, Monica, and I really am so grateful for being invited to be part of this anthology. I know it will be an amazing anthology. The people that are behind this anthology are just great, all of them. So I'm just honored to be part of this history in this chapter of the gamification history. So I'm really grateful for everything you have done, Monica, for gamification and for everything. So again, thank you so much.
All right, good. We'll see you again soon. Thank you so much, Javier. All right. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Gamification Quest podcast series. If you'd like to go deeper, you can get your own copy of the Sententia Anthology, where you'll find all of our authors' chapters collected in one place. Simply go to www.sententiagamification.com/anthology. And if you're ready to take the next step in your own practice, visit our homepage at www.sententiagamification.com to explore our certification programs and our community of practice. Until next time, Keep designing learning that engages and transforms.